Hoyo just revealed the second half banners for patch 4.3, and they are very interesting. So while I normally don't do banner reviews or should you pull type of videos, I want to do it this time. Currently we are still in the first half of this patch, and in this half we have Navia and Ayaka. Then in the second half we have Ryden and Yia. All four of these characters have one thing in common. They are all waifu main DPS, which means that people are going to get very upset at me if I have anything slightly negative to say about any of them. Jokes aside, this is a great patch to pull in if you are looking for a main DPS. Let's start by looking at Navia and Ayaka. There are only about 5 days left on this banner, so you've probably already pulled one of them if you are going to, but if you haven't and are still considering, here's my take. Navia is the newest DPS, and so far her reception has been extremely positive. She is a very good single target DPS, I would say easily one of the best single target DPS in the entire game, and she is not without AoE, although her AoE isn't anything to write home about either. In my opinion, her main drawback is that she's a melee DPS that really wants to use Bennett, so you have the circle impact issues that come with that, but because of the way most of her damage is distributed into several skill casts, and she isn't really super burst reliant, she has pretty flexible rotations, so the circle impact thing can be mitigated pretty well. Navia's best team is Navia, Farina, Bennett, and a second Geo unit of your choice. Ideally you want Zhongli or Albedo. That does put the team at 3 limited 5-star units, which some people may consider to be relatively expensive. However, something I don't see mentioned much with Navia is that Geo Traveler is unironically very close to Albedo and Zhongli for Navia, and literally everyone has a C6 Geo Traveler. So her team is actually very accessible. The only real issue will be if you don't have Farina. You can play Navia fine without Farina, but it will be considerably less strong. But if you don't have Farina, you are either a serial killer, or you just started playing the game, and are going to get her on her rerun anyway. Another great thing about Navia is that because she is Geo, even if you aren't running an actual shielder like Zhongli, the team is going to have a ton of comfort from all the crystallized shards. Crystallized shields are weak, but they still reduce the amount of damage you are taking. They still protect you from getting interrupted. When you have a lot of them, which Navia teams do, that really stacks up. Overall, I think Navia is an excellent DPS. If you saw my top 5 DPS video that I did in 4.2, I think I put Navia into the top 5 DPS list easily. If you are looking for a main DPS, she will serve you very well. Now, what about Ayaka? Before we got Farina, Ayaka's best team was Ayaka, Kokomi, Kazuha, Shenhe. This team has pretty good damage potential, and the vast majority of it is front-loaded, which can result in some pretty good clears. However, it also comes with a lot of downsides. Since like 80% of the team's damage comes from Ayaka's burst, you can lose out on a pretty absurd amount of damage in several different scenarios. An example of such scenario is in Multi-Wave, when a new wave of enemies spawns outside of Ayaka's burst. You are going to have very little damage you can do to them until Ayaka's burst is up again. This team is very strong in the right scenarios for it, but there are a lot of scenarios that will make it perform a lot worse than you might expect. Furthermore, this team is pretty expensive, having 4 limited 5 stars. Ayaka also really wants to be on Mist Splitter here. It's a massive damage increase over literally every other weapon on her, even over other 5-star weapons. Ayaka does almost all of the team's damage, so having Mist on her is extremely important. Now Ayaka has gained new units that she can use in the last patch. She can now use Farina as her Hydro and Charlotte as her second Cryo. Using Farina and Charlotte allows you to have Farina's high off-field damage the entire rotation, even when Ayaka's burst is down. Ayaka is also a lower portion of the team's overall damage here, so it is far less punishing to not have Mist Splitter. The team also has one less limited 5-star unit in it than the old team, and both Farina and Charlotte were on the same banner last patch, so chances are you already have both of them ready for Ayaka if you pull her. Overall, Ayaka is pretty great for AoE since she gets both freeze and Kazuha's grouping, although it does come with potential issues in multi-wave. She is a solid DPS unit, but if we compare her to Navia, I think Navia has far less flaws, and is the better pull overall. Unless you are specifically looking for an AoE DPS, then I would say go for Ayaka instead. Now, we also need to look at the 4-stars on this banner. Rosaria, Sucrose, and Candice. None of these characters are very good with Navia or Ayaka. Rosaria can be okay as a second cryo with Ayaka if you are using Kokomi and don't have Shenhe, but aside from that, you wouldn't pair these characters with a Navia or Ayaka. Although Sucrose is a good unit to have, as she's comparable as a buffer to Kazuha in some reaction-based teams. And Candice doesn't really have much value, there's rarely ever a reason to use her over other Hydro characters. So while Navia and Ayaka are good 5-stars to pull if you are looking for a DPS, if you are also needing more 4-star units on your account, you may want to consider skipping these two's banner. That brings us to the second half, Ryden and Yoimiya. The thing that stands out the most about this banner is the 4-stars, Bennett, Chevrus, and Sarah. Chevrus is a niche type of character, but so far from what we have seen of her kit in the event, she is looking like she is potentially going to be part of both Ryden and Yoimiya's new best teams, so her being paired with both of them could not be more perfect. And then of course, Sarah is great with Ryden, and Bennett is one of the best characters in the entire game, and will be used with both Ryden and Yoimiya's strongest teams. If you are looking for a main DPS, Ryden or Yoimiya will be excellent to pull, since their banner is giving you damn near their entire team. And in Ryden's case, it might actually just be her full team. But who would be better to go for, Ryden or Yoimiya? Ryden's DPS teams, compared to the newer DPS units that we have gotten in Sumeru and Fontaine, has noticeably fallen off. But she's still plenty strong enough. She has good front-loaded damage and her attacks have pretty large AoE. And I'm fully expecting Chevrus to elevate Ryden back up a fair bit. We will have to see for sure once Chevrus is actually released. But I think pulling Ryden on this banner will be a very good idea if you are looking for a DPS. All of the 4-stars on this banner also gain a lot of value by getting them to C6. Bennett C6 is a pretty sizable buff to Pyro DPS teams, and the Pyro Infusion enables some really nice things. Chevrus gains an excellent team-wide damage bonus buff at C6, and Sarah basically needs her C6 to be worthwhile. So these are 4-stars that you would want to go deep onto the banner for. So if you have the Primos to invest, you could go deep for C2 to 3 Ryden, while also getting the constellations on these 4-stars, and get a lot of value out of what you spent, assuming you don't get cucked out of the 4-star luck. But since all 3 of the 4-stars here are very good with desirable constellations, it's kinda hard to lose here. Now Yoimiya, I know some people think she is one of the worst limited 5-star units in the entire game. Her damage is very strictly single target. As a single target Pyro DPS, she is currently outclassed both by Lenny and Hu Tao. But I said currently. Chevrus could very well elevate her closer to their level, although I still don't think she'll be quite that good, but I would hope to be proven wrong here, because Yoimiya is hot, and I want to see her eating good. Also, I do see Chevrus somewhat mitigating Yoimiya's AoE issues, since Chevrus looks like she's going to be at C4+, able to front load a lot of AoE damage with her burst and 3 skill casts, but again, we will have to wait and see exactly how good that will be. Now, one good argument that I can make for pulling Yoimiya on this banner is, you can pull for C0 Ryden and then pull for Yoimiya, and still pick up constellations on the 4-star units, compared to going all in on Ryden. The advantage you would get by that is, you would get 2 DPS units instead of 1, and they have teams that don't share any units. For example, you could pick up Ryden C0 and use her in a team like Aggravate or Hyperbloom, then also pick up Yoimiya and use her in a team like Yoimiya, Bennett, Chevrus, Fischl. So overall, out of all of the 4 banners this patch, I think Ryden and Navia are the best pulls, but you can make good arguments for pulling Ayaka and Yoimiya as well. But the smart thing to do is skip everyone and save for C6 Columbina. If you are still considering which banner, if any, you should pull on, I hope this video gave you some useful insight to help you make that decision. Thanks. Bye.